Greetings. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast with Aaron McIntyre and Todd Erzin. I am Steve Deace. Coming up on today's show, Glenn Stanton from Focus on the Family is going to join us here at the bottom of the hour, talking about Focus's engagement of the battle in Colorado. This unprecedented demonic legislation that the legislature there is mulling over and may send to the openly homosexual governor's desk, legislation that Gavin Newsom himself would not even sign in the state of Colorado a year ago. So we'll get to Glenn Stanton about that coming up in the next hour, or the next segment of the show. Next hour, you guys might remember that yesterday Aaron featured some polling data from Scott Rasmussen, the original founder of Rasmussen Polling, who has his own independent polling firm now, looking at attitudes regarding Christianity and contemporary American culture. And we're going to go through those results and fake news or not them, or idolatry or not them. You're going to get a chance to say fake news or not, idolatry or not, or maybe both with each and every one of these pieces of data. And so we will discuss that coming up in the next hour of the show. And then for Pop Culture Tuesday, Amazon had the most interesting rental section, I think, in the history of home video, regardless of format. Betamax, VHS, DVD, streaming. I don't think there's ever been a section before, ever. Do you remember walking into the old Blockbusters, Todd, and there was a rent and repent segment? Do you remember seeing this?
I have no such recollection.
I, of course, did not ever see that, nor at the age that we had Blockbusters still, I would not have been looking for such a section at that point in time in my life, in fact, but other sections, frankly, that I shouldn't be looking at. All right, so Amazon, indeed, the number one platform on planet Earth, had a rent and repent section, and in there was The Passion and a bunch of Risen, by the way, which is a very underrated, low-key great film with Joe Fiennes from about 10 or 15 years ago you should watch. All right, so these were all Easter resurrection-themed productions, and they were in the rent and repent section. So I thought it might be fun. I have no agenda. I have no idea how you guys are going to react to this. Just the number one platform in the world has a rent and repent section. Reaction. That's essentially all we're going to do. All right. And I will be fascinated to see what kind of conversation we get going out of that with Pop Culture Tuesday here towards the end of the show. Also fascinated to get your reaction to our new project that is launching on June the 2nd. If you want to sign up to get updates, we just finished all the interior layout and the cover and back cover and all the artwork. We're headed off to the printer now for Richie Meets the Rainbow, a heartwarming tale of childhood enlightenment. Indeed. We are going to Dr. Seuss with a biblical worldview, the most demonic time of the year. All right? And hopefully give ammunition to people across the fruited plain to join us in the mockery of this mockery. All right, so if you want to get more information on this project coming out June 2nd, just in time, and we are going to make sure, we say this at Christmas and Easter, need to start saying this during Pride as well. Let's all remember the real reason for the season. This one's going to do it, all right? You can sit down with your kids. Heck, you should actually take this to your local government school and say, hey, I've got a story I'd like to read, and just sit down and share this with the kiddos. It is, after all, a heartwarming tale of childhood enlightenment. It's called Richie Meets the Rainbow. You can go to the website right now, get signed up for updates, see some of the first official previews. More to come later this week. RichieMeetsTheRainbow.com. That's RichieMeetsTheRainbow.com. And with that, it is time now to go to Aaron for his rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by frustration. President Donald Trump hit the Supreme Court yesterday on Truth Social saying, quote, "I'm doing what I was elected to do, remove criminals from our country, but the courts don't seem to want me to do that." He went on to say, great Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito correctly wants to dissolve the pause on deportations. He's right on this. If we don't get these criminals out of our country, we're not going to have a country any longer. We cannot give everyone a trial because doing so would take, without exaggeration, 200 years. years. Meanwhile, Democrats have settled on a new buzz phrase.
There has to be due process.
The due process that they deserve.
Here without due process.
Due process is the essential core element.
There's due process that exists in this country.
It's constitutional rights to due process.
Stephen Miller, your thoughts?
No American citizen receives this level of so-called due process. This isn't due process. This is called infinity process to keep you here forever. Yeah. That's what this is.
Oh no, it's crazy.
No American citizen charged with a crime, with a serious crime inside the United States, a U.S.-born American citizen receives this kind of process. Millions of dollars in free legal services, representation at every single level. Do you think that there is any, for example, any American citizen who was persecuted, who was innocent related to January 6th? Do you think they could just get this kind of relief, this kind of process? No. It was never available to them. Yeah. The whole system was rigged against them, just like it's rigged in favor of illegal alien invaders.
Moving on, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth continues on the warpath against incessant hit pieces and smear jobs against him.
This is what it's all about, trying to get at President Trump and his agenda. Those folks who were leaking, who have been pushed out of the building, are now attempting to leak and sabotage the president's agenda and what we're doing. And that's unfortunate. I know exactly why I'm here. To bring war fighting and the war fighting ethos back to the Pentagon, to rip out the insidious ideologies and not compromise and not back down, to bring in new press voices into the Pentagon, which we've done, to reestablish standards and accountability, to not tolerate leakers, to 100% operational control of our border, to get rid of trans lunacy in the military. We haven't backed down. See, here's the thing. A lot of people come to Washington and they just play the game. And it's you punch their ticket and get along to go along and, you know, start doing Meet the Press and go into the Council on Foreign Relations and spending time with all the new cocktail sipping crowd. That's not why I'm here. I'm here because President Trump asked me to bring warfighting back to the Pentagon every single day. Right. That is our focus. And if people don't like it, they can come after me. No worries. I'm standing right here. The warfighters are behind us. Our enemies know they're on notice. Our allies know we're behind them. And that, in this dangerous world for the American people, is what it's all about.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is taking time out of his high-stakes trade negotiations to talk to Americans about financial literacy.
America has been very good to me and my family, and I want to spread the word that through financial literacy, you can accumulate both financial security, peace of mind, and move toward your financial goals.
Don't you dare drain the swamp update. Here's Senator John Kennedy.
Would you support President Trump removing Jerome Powell as Fed chair?
I don't think any president has the right to remove the Federal Reserve chairman.
By the way, Kennedy said over the weekend the deportation of Abrego Garcia was a screw-up by the Trump administration and said he would call out Trump if he defies the courts. Senator Kennedy quipped sharper than a gator's tooth, but beneath it all, he's just another prehistoric swamp reptile. A progressive district attorney in Minnesota has declined to charge a Tim Walz state employee allegedly caught causing $20,000 in damage by vandalizing half a dozen Teslas. The suspected vandal, 33-year-old Minnesota government employee Dylan Bryan Adams, was allegedly spotted keying the vehicles and stripping their paint off while walking his dog around the city. Despite what police believe to be evidence of Adams committing felonies in Minneapolis, Hennepin County District Attorney Mary Moriarty, who is one of those Soros-backed DAs, will seek diversion rather than criminal charges. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will move to phase out the remaining 8 artificial food dyes in America's food supply within the next 2 years. More details on the plan are expected to be rolled out today. The Education Department will begin collection next month on student loans that are in default. Currently, roughly 5.3 million borrowers are in default on their federal student loans. And finally, Happy Earth Day.
Deep in the woods of North Carolina, an extremist eco group called Earth First bewails the violation of American nature.
I want to mourn the loss of all the old growth trees I've seen and
I think we are deeply hurting in America. I think we are deeply craving answers. I think that we've lost our identity as we have evolved into technology and into industrialized society. Bring me to this cathedral. Bring me to those guys. Bring me to this rock that has the most incredible life. That makes me feel alive.
I've looked at clear cuts and burnt forest, and I've felt outraged, but I didn't scream and I didn't cry. And I need to.
And that's what happened while we were away.
I had completely forgotten it was Earth Day until that tradition, unlike any other. Aaron, thank you very much.
Important
just your
reminder, yes.
Indeed. And your perennial reminder to not to practice holidays started by people who murdered their girlfriends. I mean, the founder of Earth Day literally murdered his own girlfriend. On the other hand, he did take recycling so seriously that he composted her remains. So I guess on one level you have to admire his commitment there. Let's get to Aaron's montage, shall we? Because there are some tropes in here. There are some tropes in here. Okay? There are some things that we have a time or two been forced to recognize, acknowledge, and discuss on this here very program.
Are you doing Kennedy, or were you slipping into like?
Yes, I'm doing an amalgamation of what annoys me because much of this montage did.
What was Obama's guy? The chickens come home to roost.
Oh, America's chickens.
Yes.
Coming home to roost. Jeremiah Wright.
Jeremiah Wright. It was an amalgam between, because we just had Kennedy on the montage. I wasn't sure which one you were going for.
Well, what we have here is a failure to communicate.
There we go. There's the molasses. Need a little bit more molasses in that.
All right, because let us say this for the 10,000th time. There is the right that is presented to you on much of Fox News. And then there's the right that many of you think that you are. And they are not the same. They are not the same. Okay? So in John Kennedy's case, John Kennedy is Lindsey Graham with folksier quips and without a Grindr account. There's no difference. There's other than that, there is literally no difference. Folksier quips, and he's a better messenger, and he doesn't have a Grindr account. But they're the same guy, and they're the same guy as John Cornyn, and they're the same guy as Mitch McConnell, and they're the same guy as Bill Cassidy, and they're the same guy as most of these red states, Tom Tillis, most of these red state senators in most of these states. They are as useful as mammary glands on a bull. They could not possibly make it within the Democratic Party. They're not smart enough, they're not cutthroat enough, they're not ruthless enough, or the demographics in the state are so against the Democratic Party that it wouldn't matter if they are. So they invade the Republican Party, and they're complete and total traitorous quislings. How would you define a system that says no one can become Fed chairman without a presidential appointment, and it is not a lifetime appointment, okay? It's not a lifetime appointment, and it's a presidential appointment. But the president has no power over when or not that, and that's part of his branch. It's part of his branch, okay, the executive branch. But that person has no real accountability whatsoever to the man that was elected by the people as head of the executive branch. Well, you might call it the swamp. That's what you might call it, and that's what Kennedy is. He's a swamp creature. What Kennedy knows is, frankly, outside of audiences like this one, too many people on the right are too lazy. And they still want things spoon-fed to them. And then if I can just tune in for a few minutes on my favorite Fox show tonight and come away with a soundbite that rubs my belly and makes me think we're making the bad man stop, that's all that's asked of me. No action is demanded or even checked upon. No work associated with said statement of faith. There's no fruit inspected. In fact, we won't even ask for any. We'll just take it all at face value. You gave me the soundbite that I wanted. And these guys have all mastered this. And they've played us all for schmucks and suckers. And they played most of you in your red states for the biggest schmucks and suckers of them all. Now, I will tell you, this is not an easy cabal to break through. When you look at how far right we have moved Iowa domestically in the last decade, this is one of the most based red states in America. And yet we have been unable to crack. With all the things we've been able to do in this state, we have been unable to crack getting better representation from our state into Washington, D.C. Everybody we send to Washington right now is a Republican, and they're anywhere from useless to a betrayer. And it often just depends on the day of the week. Every single one of them. Every single one of them. My congressman's name is Zach Nunn. It's like, that's not even a last name. It's a brand. Because you know what he's done in Congress? None. He's done absolutely none. Done none. Couldn't tell you one thing he did. Done none.
The Democrats are taking notes right now. That's pretty good, Steve.
Thank you. Okay. I mean, he's done none. You know, he's just done none while not being a Democrat. That's essentially what he does. He's done none while not being a Democrat. We got a guy in Congress right now, Randy Feenstra. What's he done? He only represents the most Republican part of our state. Can't point to one single major legislative fight or accomplishment he's had, because Lord knows there's been nothing to really engage or fight about here the last few years. Everything's been pretty hunky-dory on the right?
Oh, smooth
This
sailing.
has been a Pax Romana around
Yes.
here. Oh, yeah. You bet. So, I don't know how to break through this, which is why I've tried all over the country. I don't know how to break through. You know, Daniel and I originally met as friends because we were involved in these primary fights all over the country together. And the only one that we won of any significance against a contested Republican was the one that we thought none of us thought we had a chance to win, and that's when Dave Brad upset Eric Cantor. The amount of money it takes for people like us to be competitive in these races is pretty extraordinary. All right? On top of the amount of temptation that exists in Washington, D.C. So that's, to me, why I've always said the one job that I'd only ever consider running for is governor. Because what would give me more influence than what I can wield from this chair right here? And with the most minimal amount of bureaucracy standing in my way. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
because the presidency obviously would greatly exceed this, but the amount of bureaucracy, and we're going to talk more about that in a second too, but the amount of bureaucracy from what a president wants to do to what it takes to actually carry it forth is voluminous. It's solar system. It's cosmic. It's galaxian. All right. If it's arms out wide between a president and the bureaucracy, from edict to command to action, a governor is more like this. And in a state like Iowa, it's even more like this. Which brings me to something I think you need to know about. And then we're going to talk about the bureaucracy of the courts again. I think it's important that somebody still on the right communicates to people, even while wanting to win. I'm fully invested in the success of this administration. I told you guys that from the moment the primary ended last year, I thought we had to win. You can all do what you want to do. You need to know what I think. And then it was pretty apparent to me, the events that I watched live unfold in my family room on July 13th of last year, it was pretty clear to me at that point, something truly prophetic is happening. This is a truly prophetic moment in the country, and that's why I ran out and went across town on a Saturday night and put a Trump sign in my yard, and I was the only Trump sign in my yard in my caucus precinct until about 3 weeks before the election for the next 3.5 months. And now it is imperative. There is no gain. Whatever grievance you have with Trump, and it may or may not be petty, it may or may not be legit, but there is no gain here on our side by this administration in this term failing. There's nothing to be gained by. It will only harm us collectively on the right moving forward. We have a unique mandate. We have a unique personality. He has a unique moment. We all need to be rowing together and want to take advantage of it. However, while doing that, though, I do think it's important that at least some places still within our coalition stand up and say, we just need to we still have to be honest with our audience here. Fair?
Of course.
Okay.
More than fair.
What's happening here where you are seeing some major figures on the right and in MAGA world full throat supportive of Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense. And then you are seeing some figures on the right who are full throat supportive to the people that just got fired for leaking. You need to understand what this is really all about. And I'm going to tell you, and I'm not going to tell you which side of this you have to come down on. You're an adult, you make that decision. Okay? But I think that we need to be honest with our people. This really comes down to how to handle Iran. And there's a group of people within MAGA who essentially, I'm not saying they're right or wrong. You can ask me my opinion, I'll give it. But I'm not saying this for this moment right now to give that opinion. For you to know what's going on so you can then give an opinion. Okay? So I'm just here giving the weather forecast. But there are a group of people in MAGA who think that we have no chance to get and win any kind of military engagement, nor really should we seek one, even if Iran gets a nuclear weapon. So therefore, we should try to cut an Obama kind of deal with Iran, but with Trump as deal maker, it'll be a real deal this time. It'll be something that has real teeth behind it, real strength behind it, real modifying Iran's, program and things of that nature, and let Trump, the consummate deal maker, cut that deal so that we don't have any form of military engagement risk with Iran over them developing a nuclear program. That is a singular camp. And if you and that's Tucker Carlson's in that camp. Now I love Tucker Carlson, as you guys know, as a person. I do. But you need to know he's in that camp. And that's why he's platforming favorably the people that just got fired for leaking, because it's about that. He is in that camp. In fact, he might even be the leader of that camp. And then a lot of the other people that are like, listen, nobody in MAGA is for useless wars, but one good way to have a useless war is to let Iran get a nuclear weapon and then just hope they don't use it. All right? So, taking military force off the table is no way to negotiate anything with Iran, frankly. All right? And so the people that are in that camp are very friendly, and that would be people like, for example, Mark Levin on our own side. Okay? I'm meaning on our own platform, I should say, here on The Blaze. He would be in that camp. Or just to put a couple of faces that everyone knows so you guys know kind of what we're talking about. I'm not here to take sides right now. At a later date, we'll probably discuss that. That's not for this moment. First of all, someone just needs to stand into the room as an adult and say to all of you, this is what this is really all about. It really has nothing to do with leaking or anything of that nature. It really comes down to there are a group of people on the right that want to avoid virtually any war at all costs, no matter what. And instead want Trump to focus on coming up with crafting a tougher but better but still Obama-esque deal with Iran, where we're going to give them some form of financial incentives to not continue their nuclear program. You may call it a bribe. You may call it a financial incentive. You may call it an economic partnership. That's all in the eye of the beholder. And then there's another group of people, and Mark Levin and others are in this camp, that are like, history shows a great way to have a useless war is to let the Ayatollahs go ahead and have a nuclear weapon. And the biggest leverage we have is our military dominance over them and the threat of it. We can't take that off the table. And so these two camps, this is a proxy war about war. You see what I'm trying to say? Yeah. The battle over the leakers is a proxy war about Iran. And MAGA is having an internal fight at very high levels about this. Because you might be confused. Well, I mean, why are we... I thought we wanted to fire leakers. This doesn't make any... It's not really about leakers. It's about who they are and which camp that they're in. Right? I mean, if these were the people that didn't want the trainees in the military, would Tucker be giving them a platform favorably? No. Okay. Why is he giving them a platform favorably? Because they're in his camp about wanting to essentially craft a deal with Iran that's an Obama-like deal, but with Trump actually cutting a real deal. And that's about the fairest characterization I can give, is minus my own opinion as much as I can give. But I just thought for a few minutes, you guys needed to be educated on what this whole thing is really about that you're seeing play out. Because it's not really about much of what you're being told it's about. It's really about what I just told you. Everybody okay with that before I move on?
Yeah, I think you're right. That about the Tucker camp, and it's not just amongst the talking heads. It's like you often say, no matter how many of you want government to be cut, there's just not an appetite amongst the base right now for smaller government. And you just have to be honest about that. I think the same is true here. There's just not at post-Ukraine. There is not, a lot of people are like, I don't want war, period. End of sentence. Talk to me. I'm willing to cut all kinds. It is art of the deal time. Now, and that's the game. I think you're so smart then more broadly talking about winners or losers aren't even the point right now. Do you even understand what the game actually is?
We'll figure out what our opinions on this are later. For now, you guys just need to know what the game that's actually being played really is that everybody's arguing about. That's what the argument's about.
And I think it's totally legitimate in the face and context of Ukraine. And of course, growing up, I grew up with constant dispatches from nation building in the Middle East. I think the appetite for war is at a low point. It's at a nadir. Now, is that everybody's motivations for why they think that this just cut a deal with Iran? Is that everybody's motivations? I'm not totally sure about that. But again, I'm not God either, so I don't know if that's completely knowable.
Speaking of you're not God, let's talk about some people who think that they are. We're going to keep having to have this conversation until something is done, okay? And so let me repeat this again. We are not a nation of laws, and we never have been. We are a nation of political will, and we always will be. What due process did illegal aliens deploy in order to invade your country by the tens of millions? What due process was that? The answer is none. They didn't. That's what an invasion would be. An invasion would be an unlawful incursion of foreigners without an invitation, regardless of motivation. That would be the definition of an invasion. They didn't use any due process to invade your country. They just came and invaded. So the rules are they don't need due process to come, but we are required to grant them unlimited due process to get rid of them. There's no law for that. That's just power that the courts are claiming. So here's where you're at. This is a judicial coup. We have unelected judges playing the same role that the unelected bureaucrats in the intelligence community played in the Russia collusion coup, the same role that the unelected bureaucrats in the public health sector played with the scamdemic coup. It's the same thing. This is the swamp. This is the latest hydra that has presented itself. It must be drained, but you're not going to drain it passively. The Russian collusion probe was only going to stop by ending the Mueller probe. That was the source of all of it. And they eventually did that. The scamdemic was only going to end by ending Fauci, ultimately. He was the face of it. Trump was not willing to do that, so it ended him in his first term. And it will not be drained here in the second term without telling these unelected judges to take a long walk off a very short cliff. The courts, let's use a word biblical worldview show, so let me give you a biblical allegory here. The courts are Sanballat and Tobiah. They are attempting to bog down the righteous work of God's people, trying to rebuild the fundamental cornerstones of their civilization. They fulfill the saying, quite literally, in fact, that the devil is in the details. What Trump needs to be here is Trump needs to be Nehemiah here. He's got to refuse to be distracted by all of this and finish the very important work, the empowered sovereign. And that, in the case of Nehemiah, that was the king of Medo-Persia. And in the case here of Trump, the sovereign would be we the people. We granted him the power now to go and rebuild these walls and refortify the country. He's going to have to put the courts back in their proper place. Yes, there are plenty of things Congress could do. They're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. They're not going to do anything. We just have to accept that on some level, unfortunately. Trump has every bit the right to interpret the Constitution as head of the executive branch as the judicial branch does. And then ultimately we have elections, and you guys, we the people can decide which interpretation of the Constitution we're more in favor of and which one we're not. If he does not assert that power or authority fully, because again, we're not a nation of laws. We never have been. We're a nation of political will, and we always will be. If he does not willfully assert that power and authority, he will not stop the judicial insurrection. It's not going to stop itself. He's going to have to stop it. And that's where we are. He's going to have to defy this and make the case for it. And he's got at least one Supreme Court justice, we talked about this yesterday in Samuel Alito, saying, I'm riding shotgun. So then let's roll. Hey, we're back here on the Steve Deace Show, and we are powered by our friends over at Preborn. Last year, Preborn saved over 67,000 babies from being murdered by their moms. And in doing so, also saved their moms as well from making the kind of mistake that mars the soul. And you guys were a big part of that, our audience here at The Blaze, with your generous support. So we want to keep that going here in 2025 as well. You know, for as little as $28, your tax-deductible donation could fund an ultrasound that could prick the conscience of a mom considering the murder of her child and double that baby's chances at life and double maybe that mama's chances at new life as well. So if you guys want to continue that generosity, and some of you can give even more, that's great. And the other thing we love about Preborn too is they practice biblical art of persuasion. There is truth. There's a confrontation that takes place where a mom's conscience is confronted with the reality that that is another heartbeat that does not belong to her. And that's another person that she is carrying. But when mom turns away from the temptation of entering into that darkness, though, and into the light of motherhood, now they offer the grace as well. They are there for up to 2 years after that baby is born with support for that mom and her baby. Really practical things, prenatal care, postnatal care, counseling for things like postpartum, baby car seats, baby formula, diapers, right? And all of this they provide, all of it is free of charge to the mom and her baby. But we, of course, know it's not free of cost. And that's where we come in. So please continue that generosity with our friends over at Preborn today. Make your tax-deductible donation today by dialing pound 250 and saying the keyword baby on your mobile phone. That's pound 250, keyword baby on your mobile phone. Or you can go to preborn.com/Steve. That's preborn.com/Steve. Well, of course, we have been focused on one of the most demonic pieces of legislation. I just can't, like I've said many times recently, when I got into this business almost 20 years ago, I never thought the term demonic was going to be part of my everyday common and analytical vernacular. But here we are. I just don't, there are some things that are just so nihilistic in nature that even go further than our own craven, sinful, totally depraved natures will do on their own, that you just have to attribute them to some form of other external prompting from just the recesses of even the most depraved minds. And this legislation from Colorado, where your children can be taken away if you won't affirm their pronouns, if you don't want to be an accomplice to their mutilation, and maybe instead of you acting as a parent, you're treated as a criminal by the state as well. Legislation that not even Gavin Newsom can bring himself to sign about a year ago is now being fully vetted and proposed in the state of Colorado, a state which not too long ago sent a Native American Republican U.S. Senator, and now essentially is looking at legislation that is more nihilistic than even what the state of California thought it had political cover to enact. Glenn Stanton is here from Focus on the Family to discuss that battle. Glenn, we appreciate you joining us here today. We think on our show, I'm guessing you guys agree, that every believer, really, whether you live in Colorado or not, should care about the precedent of this piece of legislation. So welcome to the show.
Steve, so good to be with you. And your setup was just absolutely great. And I want to start right there. I want every believer to know that discussing this bill and the issue of gender is a gospel issue, because if we cannot speak sensibly about what male and female are in the image of God, we cannot speak sensibly about God's image in humanity. I mean, the very first chapter of Genesis tells us this. So for all Christians, all pastors, all leaders who think that these gender issues shouldn't be of concern to Christians, you need to know your theology, because our theology tells us very clearly God created the male and female, and that's not just, some old-fashioned idea. If we're going to speak about God, we have to be able to understand what male and female are. And these two bills that we're going to be talking about today, and I appreciate you giving us the opportunity to talk about them, threaten the definition of what it means to be male and female in the integrity of family.
Glenn, can you give our audience an update on the status of these two bills? And if people want to look these up, if they want to get active from across the country, because there are forces, I would argue, from across dimensions backing this legislation, not just across the country. So there are going to be believers across the country that have a vested interest in putting this down while we have a chance. What are these two bills, and what is their current status?
Yeah, good. And I appreciate the opportunity to do that. I've got the two bills right here, and I'm going to start with one of them. One of them is a lesser known bill, and it is House Bill 25, means year 25, House Bill 25-1309. And basically what this is concerning protection of access to gender-affirming health care. And I'm going to read from what the bill says right here in the summary. Under current law, if this passes, under current law, health benefit insurance plans must include coverage for, quote, gender-affirming health care as part of all individual and group health benefit plans. And they lay out and they specify everything that you could ever imagine that would be needed, quote unquote, for gender-affirming health care will have to be covered by every health plan in the state of Colorado. So that neutralizes parental authority to say, no, you're not, to tell a minor, you're not going to have these kinds of surgeries. Either a minor or adult child. I have adult children, they're 26, they're still under my health care plan. Mm-hmm. This would allow the financial empowerment for all of these medical things to happen. Basically, it's the financial facilitator for children becoming gender medicine patients for life. And that's just incredibly pernicious. We can talk about that in more detail. But this other bill right here is House Bill 1312, and it's entitled Concerning Legal Protections for Transgender Individuals. So one provides the health care that they'll need. This provides protection for people basically undergoing sex hormones, puberty blockers, genital and breast mutilation for adults and minors. And what this basically does, what this bill does, is says that any parent who wants to pump the brakes on this and says, hey, I don't think this is a good idea, and either opposes it or is even cautious about it, they can have their child taken away from them. But it's not just parents, but it's teachers too. It basically says every school and every teacher in the state of Colorado must be fully affirming of anything that any student wants to do in terms of gender radicalization and exploration. So that's the quick overview, and we can go into more detail about each of them. But yeah, that's the big picture, Steve.
Let's make this very practical to people. Let's say, because you mentioned the breast surgery, for example. Let's say you have a middle-aged or late middle-aged wife, or you're that woman, for example, and after multiple kids and things of that nature, and how your body changes, and your doctor, your chiropractor, somebody comes to you and recommends, a breast reduction surgery would be good for you. Your back issues, your neck issues would probably be good for your posture, things of that nature. Your insurance won't cover that. They'll consider it to be cosmetic. Okay.
Right.
But what Glenn is saying is they're now going to force. So therefore, that's why a lot of times they don't recommend it, even if it would be medically helpful to you, because there's no incentive. You're going to have to pay out of pocket for something like that. Okay.
Yeah.
What Glenn is saying in this case, though, is if your 14-year-old daughter, 15, 16-year-old daughter, all right, it decides that she needs to have this done, for example. Okay, now, and in order to transition to become a boy, that will now be fully covered, invested, and fully incentivized in the process. That's just a very practical example of the hierarchy of medical care here that's going to be provided and offered.
Yeah, okay. So, and in this bill, you're exactly right, Steve. But in this bill, it says that they need to get permission from a medical doctor and I want to read this. It's unbelievable. By a medical doctor or a behavioral health care provider. They don't define what that is. That could be your school counselor.
And that's where many of these
stickers.
I think, not to interrupt, I'm sorry, but that is the gene pool of many of these transition island of Dr. Moreau trips is the school guidance counselor in the government school. So just wanted to interject.
Yeah, absolutely. That. Yeah. All they need to do is find a counselor with all those stickers all over their car, or all over their office door, or find them online and say, hey, I think I'm a boy. And, oh, yes, well, you need medically affirming health care. I'll write you out a script for that. And boom, it's off. And there is nobody, not a teacher, not a parent. If this law passes in Colorado, there is nobody, a teacher, a parent, who says like, hey, wait a minute, let's think about this. They are absolutely neutralized. In fact, the parents could have their own child taken away by not fully affirming this decision. I mean, you talked about this being demonic. It's draconian. It's beyond what anybody could imagine. And it's curious, Steve, that even there are gay activists in the state of Colorado who are hoping that these bills will be killed because even they realize that they're too radical. That's how radical this is.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've seen Andrew Sullivan in recent years, and I've described him as kind of the Benjamin Franklin of the homosexual movement in America, kind of their first original thinker. Right. And even he's essentially been expunged. He's been exiled, out of the rainbow, what I like to call the rainbow jihad, Glenn, because he views this gender stuff as going so far that it will now cause a normie backlash against the so-called other progress they've made for homosexuality across the culture. That people will say, hey, the Steve Deaces and Glenn Stantons of the world who made all these slippery slope arguments for 10 or 20 years, guess what? They all turned out to be prophesying to us. They were all right. So I guess we got to go back and try to reclose Pandora's box. And so I'm not surprised to see that there are some activists who feel they've accomplished some form of relevancy and station and agency in the culture and are like, hey, we're good here. If we keep pushing this, we're going to cause a reverb against some of the progress we've already established.
Yeah. And they realize, it's curious, Steve, and you know this so well, but people talk about an LGBTQ community. There is no LGBTQ community. They're all divided over the nature of the binary. And what you were just talking about, Andrew Sullivan, the gays and the lesbians, they've never been, real ideological friends of ours. But in a sense, it's become now the gays and lesbians are super clear on what a man and a woman is. But it's the T's and the Q's that have come in and changed all that up.
I mean, if there's no gender, Glenn, then what's the point of identifying as homosexual? If there's no gender, then what's the point of it then?
That is precisely it. Mm-hmm. That is precisely it. That whole construct is just imploding because of they can't define what a male or a female or a male is.
On the other hand, though, because of what they've already succumb to morally, they lack the moral standing to draw the kind of line to say, okay, we've gone far enough, and they can't on their own. That's why they're hoping people like you and I will kill this, but they aren't able to do it. They're not going to stand up against their own cult and say, all right, guys, we've proved our point, we've won enough, let's stop this. So let's get to how we stop it. Okay. Yeah. Because we made some critical comments about where we perceived your organization was, frankly, out of respect for the fact that for decades you're kind of been considered the gold standard in this realm. Okay. And it's right in your own backyard. And I got inundated with notes from people telling me, hey, I live here, I'm not hearing anything, I know where the churches are, etc. You guys responded. You guys gave us specifics on what you're doing. I relayed all that to our audience last Friday.
And we appreciate that.
And so here, the reality is, I think you can reach a level of church. I'm trying to say this respectfully, but you can reach maybe a tempo or tenor of a church. You get what I'm trying to say here, Glenn? Okay, that might be more comfortable with the way you guys do things than maybe the way I do things, right? Okay, and it's in those churches where there are a lot of people whose voices would stop something like this, and that's why I think you guys are uniquely positioned to help us beat this here.
Yeah. Well, and thank you. And I mean, God has given us a bit of favor in this state, in this country, across the world. And we have to use that influence well and properly and correctly. And I mean, I can tell you what we're doing on the team that I work on, the Daily Citizen team. We are all in on this. And as you announced on your show Friday, there are a number of things that we are doing. we could do more, and we need to do more. I mean, like, at the end of the game, you think, like, did we give it everything we had to kill this? Now, here's the deal. Here's where we are in this state. These two very pernicious bills, they were jammed through the House. The Democrats shut down debate. They did not allow debate, and they just passed it. And now it goes to the Senate. And we have been really, really surprised. In fact, I went on yesterday to try to sign up to testify against these two bills in the Senate. They're not even assigned to a committee in the House. I mean, you can't quite sign up for them. So we're waiting for them to come up in the Senate. We have till May 7th. Our judicial session ends May 7th. And we figure, I've talked to some of the activists here, we figured that they will have to bring this publicly by at least May 4th to have enough time to jam it through. So we are watching this every day, and as soon as we can speak out as citizens and they allow us to testify against these bills, we will call on pastors, we will call on Christians to come forth and hit the State House and let our legislators know. We can do it in letters now, but showing up is dramatically important. We've had a number of pastors that have already shown up to the State House, but as this gets assigned to a committee in the Senate, that's when we really, really need to hit it. And we are watching this every day with a number of other friends here in Colorado.
That's good to hear. So I got 30 seconds, Glenn. How can our audience follow what you guys are doing to fight this?
Go to Daily Citizen. You can just Google Focus on the Family, Daily Citizen, and we have articles up right now that show you the action steps that you can take, how to write your Colorado senator, how to sign up to be able to go testify. But go to Daily Citizen, and that's where you can find the action items there. And Steve, we appreciate you hitting this and helping us get this word out.
Well, thank you, Glenn, and thank you for coming on at relatively short notice. I'm glad we can make it work. And if there's anything we can do to assist with this, we are happy to do it. Okay, just let us know.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve.
All right, thank you. That's Glenn Stanton over at Focus on the Family. We are about to the end of the hour. So I'm going to let you guys comment on those efforts when we come back and get your feedback on this. And then we're going to get into fake news and not / idolatry or not. Because my buddy Scott Rasmussen, the original founder of Rasmussen Polling, came out with some interesting data points about attitudes towards Christianity and certain Christian doctrines in the culture over Easter weekend. So we're going to go through those data points and discuss them when we come back here at Hour 2. Stay tuned. All right, we're back with Hour 2 here, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. Steve Deace here alongside Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. Let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. Several different ways that you can take advantage of that. Email the show, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. Follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Please subscribe to our new YouTube channel, at Deace Show on YouTube. That's at Deace Show on YouTube. Reminder, we've had to start all over there because of the censorship the original channel received from All the Truth we told you at the time that they wanted you dead instead. So we're going to try and start all over again and see if that works. We shall see. You guys can help us with that. Subscribe to at Deace Show on YouTube. And then don't forget as well, if you listen to the podcast version, you can hit us up with a 5-star review or a 1-star. We would never ask you to lie for us, of course. We like to provoke extremes. So we just want 1 and 5-star reviews, hopefully more 5s than 1s. Okay. But I'd rather see a 1 than a 3. All right. So, I mean, the 3, that's kind of lukewarm. That doesn't do anything, So, yeah, we love those 5-star reviews. Thank you to all of them, all of you that have given us one already. We greatly appreciate that. And then hit follow if you're on Apple iTunes. Subscribe everywhere else to ensure that every time we do a new episode here of the Steve Deace Show, it's there in your podcast feed every single time. Thank you for that, too. And thank you to our friends over at BIRCH Gold, where we are seeing gold continue to hit record highs right now as we speak. President Trump specifically exempted gold and silver bullion from the tariff wars that are going on right now. So while there are new policies in place that are triggering a little financial uncertainty, the administration is still preserving your ability to diversify into precious metals. If you're concerned about your savings, then we encourage you to have a free consultation with BIRCH Gold and their precious metals specialists. The first step is to text Steve to 989-898. Text Steve to 989-898 and receive your free, no obligation information kit on gold. That's the ultimate guide for gold in the Trump era. You can text Steve to 989-898 to receive that. And also, by the way, learn how gold and silver can be used in a tax sheltered account for you by converting an existing IRA or 401k into a gold IRA for no money out of pocket at all with BIRCH Gold. They've got an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau. Thousands of thankful customers. Text my name, Steve, to get started right now to the number 989-898. Again, text Steve to 989-898. All right, gentlemen, want to get your reaction to the conversation we had with Glenn Stanton at Focus on the Family. And I just want to further, real quick, flesh out what I said to Glenn there at the end. There is a layer of church in this country where there's just a different tone, style, temperament at all than how we do things here on our show. And where the pastor of that church is going to be way more comfortable with the way Focus on the Family does things than somebody like us does things. And we're going to be, for better or for worse, less inclined to be able to reach that pastor, even with this vast and wide as this platform is, to reach that pastor and motivate him and inspire him to engage his people. Because the amount of voices and votes in those kinds of churches would absolutely chloroform a piece of legislation like this if they knew about it and they were mobilized accordingly. They snap it. They destroy it. Okay, but it's probably more likely somebody with Focus on the Family's style and approach to doing things, as opposed to, say, this show's, is going to get into those churches and get those people mobilized. That's why I think they're so vital in this fight. All right, and that's what I was trying to convey there to Glenn towards the end of our conversation. But gentlemen, your thoughts on what you how you thought that conversation went?
Well, I just want to be clear what you were saying there. You're saying that ignorance is just as likely the current culprit as an action, that the people just don't know?
Correct. Yes.
Wow.
And this dynamic exists in suburbs in America everywhere. In affluent suburbs where a lot of people go to churches, they're very well aware of what that church's latest building campaign and expansion campaign is and what their latest community outreach program is, but they have no idea, frankly, how they're being raped, pillaged, and plundered at the state legislature, the city council meeting on a daily basis, and no one would dare tell them.
But if they knew, you're still confident they would act aggressively?
More of them would act than currently are. How many of them would act? I just know it'd be better than a baseline of 0. Can we start with that? All right. So starting when one more person would be 100% improvement. Okay. So it would be far better than the current baseline. Yes. This is the prophet, brother. My people perish for a lack of knowledge. Yeah.
I do think the ignorance is not a different thing, though. Ignorance is inaction. The desire not to know, the desire to stay comfortable, desire with everything we've seen on multiple fronts. I think our churches, regardless if this is bill or not, are all Catholic or Protestant of any conservative Orthodox strain, are very much guilty of this. I've addressed it with Catholic bishops here in Iowa, where this stuff isn't currently happening to the extent that it is in Colorado, but they're clearly trying, and they're trying hard. You have to be willing, and many aren't, of saying and doing the things that are going to probably upset some of the tithers. And that's where a lot of the rubber meets the road on this stuff. I've seen this with my own eyes locally within my own parish, the lectures I've gotten from seasoned citizens who will lecture me with a straight face. Well, you have to understand the church is also a business. No, it's not. You've fallen for a lie. So I think you've got to understand the psychology of this. You've got to go in there and communicate to people that think everything is okay as long as the Broncos schedule still comes out on time.
And many of those people are going to be in the kinds of churches more likely to listen if Focus on the Family sounds the shofar than if the Steve Deace show does. That's just a fact.
I pray that you're right. But here's what we can do. How about we conduct tryouts? Let's find out right now, because you either have the spirit of Nehemiah on this issue or no spirit at all.
Right on. Aaron?
You invoked, is it Hosea, my people perish for a lack of knowledge. Mm-hmm. What was one of your first books, if not your first book?
Without a vision,
the people perish. What is the vision of these pastors in the churches that you're describing? I know them well. What is the vision? In the context of the tariff war, the reason why we've gotten so far down the road and kicked the can down the road, at least one of the major contributing factors, is because of the inability of leadership in the United States, because of our 2, 4, 6-year system of political realignment, an inability to see more than 24, 48 hours down the road. That's maybe an overstatement and exaggeration of why we are where we are with trade in this country. That's a completely different context from what we're talking about. But I think a similar dynamic exists within the churches. Without a vision, the people perish. I think what a lot of this comes down to is that the pastors of these churches, these congregations, I believe a lot of them probably know their Bible very well. A lot of them probably have a very genuine heart for seeing people come to the knowledge of salvation, come to salvation and grow maybe in their knowledge of God and in theology. I'm sure that genuine heart exists there. That pastoral care heart exists there. But again, we're talking about head knowledge. This is the recurring theme of Theology Thursday over and over and over again when we're going through Romans. The vision that's lacking, and I think that's very short-sighted, is that your freedom and ability to speak out on existential issues is a luxury that is not guaranteed. Mm-hmm. That's the vision that is lacking from some of these churches. The good news is that coming up this Sunday, that vision can be reacquired. At any moment, it really can. The ability to act and speak out is a luxury that is not guaranteed forever.
Nope. Use it or lose it, brother.
Exactly.
Yep.
So that is the vision that's lacking from a lot of these churches. I pray that organizations like Focus on the Family can wake them up and stir them from their slumber, because I think it is a slumber right now.
Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Can I say one thing, too? From a Protestant perspective, you remind people all the time where this whole thing started. On a boat full of people risking everything. And before that, they moved countries to another place. They did not just sit and meditate. They acted over and over and over again in the name of the Lord. Yet we constantly in our comfort sit in place.
Correct. But let me give some encouragement. Those Puritans only became pilgrims once it was clear they had no other alternative.
When they realized they did not have the luxury to speak out.
Correct. They put up with being, John Bunyan was put in prison. That's where he wrote Pilgrim's Progress. They put up with what's in the Declaration of Independence. I can never remember the exact quote, but we are predisposed to suffer.
Yeah, mankind hath shown that we will suffer evils as long as evils are suffered.
Correct. And we have to, the ratio, and in every era it's different. What's the trigger point where it's no longer sufferable to suffer such indignities, right? Okay. And you could argue, and this is what you would say, and you'd be largely correct, which is because of the level of technological comfort afforded us in the era in which we live, our point of insufferability is way lower and worse off than any previous era of humanity. And you're probably right about that. And if you're not exactly right, you're at least so close to the target, you might as well be. Okay. So, but every previous generation of humankind also had to get to the insufferability point. That's just the human condition. We're sons of Adam. If we can be passive and think we can get away with it, we will. That's the legacy we've inherited from the garden. We will do that, okay? So we have to get to a point where it becomes very obvious to us now that there's no other path forward. I mean, our own founding fathers, they spent years and years and years. I mean, some of those emissaries were named Franklin and Jefferson and Adams. All right, they were the ones we were sending across the channel over and over again to negotiate, bargain, please give us our rights as Englishmen over and over and over and over again. So even they had to get to a point of insufferability to finally say, we now pledge our lives, fortunes, and sacred honors.
I have good tidings of great joy. We're here, Steve.
I would kind of think a piece of legislation in the state that gave us Focus on the Family and many of the largest pro-family Christian ministries in American history, saying we're going to literally come and take your kids from you if you don't let us take them to the island of Dr. Moreau. I kind of think we're here, all right? And if we're not here, by golly, then I think then sulfur following is the only thing that would take to get us to think that we've arrived at that point. You see what I'm saying? So that's why I reacted to this the way that I did on this show last Monday, all right? I'm thankful that Focus responded and was proactive about responding and then about coming on, because the reality is we need them. And I love the young pastor of the growing church we had on last week. That guy's heart of my own heart, man. That's chip off the old block. I mean, he was quoting our own show back to us, okay? But and ultimately, I think he's the future of where this is going to go. Guys like the guy we had on last week from, what's that called, 1312? Is that what? Because that's the
Fight 1312.
Fight 1312, right? He is the future of where this has to go. All right, but we're not at that future quite yet. And we have armies sitting in these churches with pleated khaki pastors and sweater vested pastors. And those pastors are frankly way more likely to respond to a shofar call from Focus on the Family than they are from us. I'm just being self-aware about that. And I like winning. You know what I like even more than getting credit for things, and what I like even more than being acknowledged and being personally rewarded or acknowledged? You know what I love even more than that? Winning. And I'm a big believer in the plaque on Ronald Reagan's desk, man. It's amazing what you can get done when you don't care who gets the credit for it. So by golly, I mean, I've got no problem at all if Focus can get into those churches where the voices and votes are there to take this demonic piece of legislation and send it back to the bowels of hell from whence it came. By golly, I'll raise a banner and urge this audience to all cut them a check in thankful gratitude for the fact that they did that just days after saying, where are you at? Because I just want to win. That's all I want to do. I don't care who gets the credit. I don't care what you think about me. I don't care. I don't care if it makes me rich. I would love to be rich. I'd love it if you liked me. I'd love it if I got significance and acknowledgments. I don't turn them down, but I'm not motivated by any of those things. I just want to win. I just want to have an America for our children and grandchildren to inherit. That's all that I want. And everything else is frankly secondary to that, which is why I make decisions sometimes that are confusing to you and maybe are confusing to even people that work for and with me. Well, boy, that seems kind of risky. Why are we doing that? That doesn't seem like it'll pay off. And most of the time that turns out to be true. But sometimes it doesn't. I just want to win. That's all I want to do. And the win to me is not how big of a house did I move into with a bunch of square footage with my kids grown and out of the home now I don't use and don't even want to take care of. That's not a win to me. The win is when they call me home, do I hear two things? Well done from my maker. Do I hear well done, good and faithful servant? And do I hear from my children and grandchildren at my funeral? Thank you, Pops. You finished the race. You left us with a chance. That's the win. And everything else is great and can be fun. And I'm human and I've got a man cave and I like games and I like vacations. I like all that kind of stuff too. But it's not a way of life. And I can't take any of it with me at the end. No one had the best trip to Universal Studios, and I'm going there, taking my wife on vacation there later this year. I can't wait to go see Epic Universe. We're literally counting down the days. But if I have a heart attack and die between now and the early October when we're taking that trip, my wife, or if I have a heart attack a week after we go, no one's putting on my tombstone, hey, had the best trip to Universal Studios. That's not the lasting legacy I'm looking to leave here. We need to win. And you fight wars with the soldiers you have. So I just want to win. And I don't care if Focus on the Family's leading the fight. Focus on your mom. I don't care, okay? Vote for Pedro. I don't give a rip. I just want to win. And if I can help win, I'm in. And if you're not helping us win, I'm not. Fair? I keep saying this over and over again, but that's really the only ultimate standard I've got here. I just want to win. Now, speaking of leaving a legacy, one thing you've got to do, particularly when you get to my age or older, is make sure that you have secured that legacy. Our friends at Trust and Will can help you do that. Listen, creating a trust and a will, this can be a slow, time-consuming process. Trust and Will makes creating your will and your life decisions way easier and way more time efficient. And it's also extremely user-friendly. We updated our situation a few years ago, and before I decided to start promoting them, I said, hey, Aim, you walk through this, and let's do this for our family and tell me what you think. And she came back absolutely raving about it. So that's why I'm raving about it now to you. All right. With an overall rating of excellent, thousands of 5-star reviews on Trustpilot, used by hundreds of thousands of families and counting, whether we're talking about just a will, a trust, anything state-specific, legally valid, customized to your need, care wishes, nomination guardians, final arrangements, power of attorney, etc. All right. Uncomplicate the process with Trust and Will. Protect what matters most in minutes at trustandwill.com/Deace. Trustandwill.com/Deace and get 10% off. That's 10% off at trustandwill.com/Deace. All right. Fake news or not, and idolatry or not. All right. And you know what I forgot to do? Is grab that.
I've got him.
You've got him. All right. Let's go through these one by one. So pollster Scott Rasmussen, the original founder of Rasmussen Polling, he sold the company about a decade ago. He now is back. He kind of reemerged here in the last year or two and has been doing his own independent polling. And over Easter weekend, he released these poll results on American attitudes towards Christianity. All right. So are these data points fake news or not, idolatry or not, or both? Or not both or not. I think that makes sense. You guys follow me here? Or did I confuse myself?
We have more options than usual.
Yes, we're doubling it up because this crosses over into news and idolatry both, right? Okay. So 77% of all voters. Now, the key here is voters. We're not polling Americans, voters, right? People engaged in the process, all right? 77% of all voters believe that Jesus Christ actually existed and walked the earth. All right? 77%, which would mean a little less than 1 in 4 don't, of people who voted in the last election. What do you think? Fake news or not? Idolatry or not? Yes, no, both, maybe so.
I think that's believably not fake news. I'm taking it very literally. Voters not thinking about it too much, no matter how much they hated the church or found it needed to be, advance into the brave new world of the future. But there was a real guy named him. That's a pretty low bar. So also, that's probably not fake news.
Am I allowed to make any stipulations about how they are arriving at that conclusion?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, you bet.
So, do they profess, not necessarily believe? Because I know it says believe. Like really believe or profess? I'll say yes, not fake news that they might profess that. 73% really believing, I'm saying that's fake news.
Well, you're doing something theological. I was just doing something historical.
You can take any approach to this you want. Whatever you want to do.
I was just doing something historical. They believe that there was a guy named Jesus. It's not a made-up fairy tale that he existed. I mean, heck.
Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong one. 77% of voters believe, historically, yes. Then I'd say that's not fake news.
Okay. All right.
So the next one I think is.
All right. So the next one, 73% believe Jesus was the Son of God. All right. So almost 3/4 of all voters in the last election, according to Scott Rasmussen, believe that Jesus was the Son of God.
Yeah, this is fake news.
Yeah.
All right. Explain why.
We don't
mean the poll, but people claiming that claiming they believe this is what we mean. That's what we're saying. Because we're not here to question Scott Rasmussen's polling methodologies. We don't, frankly, know. We're talking about the results.
Right.
I just want to clarify that. Yeah. All right.
I don't think there's any fruit that comes remotely close to convincing
There's that level of critical mass and belief in that?
Look in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, belief is the operative word there. Really, what do we mean by believe? Believe he's the Son of God? Now, people might profess that. Maybe even 73% of all voters might even profess that. But believe that? No.
All right, next one. 71% believe that Christ died for their sins.
See, everyone, that just becomes less likely because of the one we just talked about. How is... No. That's No.
Yeah, I'm saying fake news as well. Again, not questioning Scott Rasmussen. But how many... 70... Do people know what sin is?
Yeah. That's exactly the right question to ask.
Yeah.
Because what are... We have to, like, the number of Democrats, modern day Democrats you have to believe said yes to this. And then everything that is traditionally, conventionally, throughout all history, basically agreed upon is clearly sin. They don't agree with any of that. So how is this possible?
Yep. I mean, it's quite a bit. We're one of the leaders in going after godlessness on the right, and the idea that we can have liberty and freedom and limited government without Christ and without the Bible. We're concerned about the emergence of godless thought on our own side, which means what you just said is key. The amount of Democrats that had to consent to this is extraordinary. I mean, just doing the math off the top of my head, I mean, essentially somewhere around 40% of Democrats would have to agree with this.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a pretty high bar. All right,
Yeah.
next. Okay. Next. 65% believe that Christ physically rose from the dead. 65%. So 2/3 of Americans.
I want to believe this. I want to believe. I want to believe all of these. But again.
Are you noticing a trend line here?
Yeah.
Meaning that the more specific the question becomes, the lower the number gets. Are you noticing this? Okay.
I'm noticing it, but I'm surprised it's not dropping off as fast as I would have thought.
Yeah.
I thought that there would be a shelf you'd hit, and it's just this trickle.
Yeah.
Regardless of that trend line, this poll is either really good news or really bad news.
Well, we'll get to that at the end. 62% believe that he walked on water. So basically, Scott is using that as a stand-in for performed miracles, okay? By providing a specific example of one. Rather than just say, because I'm sure, I bet if they said Jesus, performed miracles, the number's probably higher than 62%, don't you think? Just a generic thing, performed miracles, probably higher than 62%. So let's quantify a miracle. What did he do? Here's one of them. And you can see the numbers, still a super majority, but it drops down to 62%.
No, I don't. Now we are increasingly getting from fake news to idolatry, because with each question, the amount of demonic feng shui that you have to do to make this happen, because most of these people on the left who would have to answer this, who would say this, will tell you that God is so incapable of specifically controlling the elements that we have no idea what a gender is. Mm-hmm. Yet he's capable of walking on water. That if you are reasonable and you sit down and do the math there, you have to realize, I'm really stupid. But they do this every day. I don't believe they believe that for a second.
So we're talking about millions more people believe, that's 11%. Millions more people believe that Jesus is the Son of God than that he walked on water.
Yep.
We're still probably talking about at least hundreds of thousands, if not millions, more people believe he rose from the dead than that he walked on water. That doesn't make any sense.
I think I knew you guys were going to say that, or at least one of you did. So I'm ready for a hypothesis to proffer something that would make this make sense. The current state of the American church. The current lack of biblical discipleship, orthodoxy-fueled catechism. I think it would make sense of the randomness of much of this. Because much of the teaching and preaching that goes on, even in the churches still holding to orthodoxy, is fairly random. It's not purposeful. It's
100 miles wide and an inch deep.
It's just random. What I mean by random and not purposeful, what I mean is there's still a ministry plan. Your pleated, khakied pastor and sweater-vested pastor still has a plan of what he's going to preach and when, but there's no real dot connecting. It's not with a purposeful intent of turning people out into a certain kind of person that's different than they were before they came in. You see what I'm saying? Outside of a generic, I gave my sins to, ask Jesus in my heart once to forgive me of my sins. There's no formational preaching. The intent is not the formation of an alternative worldview. So it's random amazing facts. Random amazing facts. And that's kind of what these are, random amazing facts. So you guys looked at these numbers and did the math right away because you guys are catechized people. So you looked at these numbers and said, well, if that has to be true, then blank must also be true, right? What if you're in churches where that's not required often? Hey, Jesus rose from the dead. See you next Sunday. Hey, Jesus walked on water. It was cool. See you next week. Peace out. See what I'm saying? Just random amazing facts. There's not a purposeful worldview being inculcated. Random amazing facts. And you'll get random amazing stats when you've been taught largely random amazing facts. Discuss.
I've got no argument against that to make. It is the Occam's razor approach to everything. The church is broken, and both people on the flock side and the shepherd side often want it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Veggie Tales was supposed to be for children. Let the listener understand.
I'm just going to tell you right now, that's some of the, before Phil Vischer went insane, that was some of the finest catechesis that happened in the evangelical church for about 10 years.
For children.
For anybody, but it was targeted at children, correct? I guarantee you there are more evangelical parents that know when I reference don't bow down to the chocolate bunny, are way more aware of what that means than when I use the term Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Nebuchadnezzar way more that know the colloquialism than the actual story.
The only question left to ask then is, what are the idols that keep propping this up? And are we going to smash them?
Correct. We keep coming back to that question. Correct. All right, Pop Culture Tuesday is next. Stay tuned. Folks, we need to talk about something that the corporate media out there would rather you ignore. You've heard their version, the corporate media's version of January 6th. Now it's time to see what it is that they have been trying to hide. The final episode of Blaze TV's in-depth investigation into January 6th drops today, and it blows the narrative wide open. We've got Capitol surveillance footage, conflicting timelines, serious questions about Officer Harry Dunn's infamous story. It's streaming right now exclusively on Blaze TV. So you've got to be a Blaze TV subscriber to see this. Subscribe today at blazetv.com/J6. blazetv.com/J6. That's blazetv.com/J6 and watch the full investigation from beginning to the end. The final installment up today right now. blazetv.com/J6. All right. You guys ready for some Pop Culture Tuesday?
You bet.
Yes.
So I saw a prominent Catholic account on X over the weekend urging people to watch The Passion again for Holy Week, and I realized I'd not seen it for several years, So, I was watching it like every year at this time, like I watched the Christmas specials every year at that time. So, for just various reasons, it hadn't gotten to it like 3-4 years in a row. So I'm like, I need to get reconnected with it. That's a great idea. So had some time Easter Sunday after church and before everybody came over for dinner. And I don't know how you guys' wives are, but my wife, I love to help, but there are certain days of the year she doesn't want my help. Christmas and Easter and Thanksgiving are 3 of them. All right. And then when the meat is done, come cut it up. Other than that, stay out of my way. So I went down and watched The Passion. And I thought we had owned it digitally. We didn't. So I went on Amazon to buy it. And I searched for it and I go through the menu, and it's in a section with a very cheeky title. Amazon over Easter constructed a section of films like The Passion and Risen with Joe Fiennes. Again, if you've never seen that film, it is a low-key masterpiece. That's a great story. Tells the story of the resurrection through the eyes of a Roman legion leader played by Joseph Fiennes, who is charged with investigating his own soldiers who were overseeing the grave and what they actually saw. And his first lieutenant is the guy who played Harry Potter's rival. Who am I thinking of?
Draco
Malfoy, yes. The guy that played Draco Malfoy is his first officer in the film. It's exceedingly well done. I would really urge you to watch that if you never have. And it was in this section, and you had Zeffirelli's Jesus of Nazareth was in this section, and some of the Kingdom movies like I Can Only Imagine was in this section. And the name of the section was that Amazon had given this section of films for Easter. The name they had given it was Rent and Repent. Rent and Repent. And I chuckled at seeing it at first. Then I wasn't sure, should I be offended at this? On the other hand, is this, a clear, blatant attempt to pander to me and people like me, but by people that don't understand me, so it comes across as patronizing? Should I be flattered that they even attempted to, pander to me whatsoever at all? Okay, but that's what it was called on Amazon. All right, it was called Rent and Repent. Okay, very clever. As somebody who's about to send off to the printer a Dr. Seuss style of book, it ain't easy to make an entire thing rhyme all the time. I'm just going to tell you that. All right? It took us months to do that. All right. So, but Rent and Repent was the section offered on Amazon over the Easter weekend. I offer no other commentary. I'm just going to throw that out there and say reaction. So react.
Occam's razor. The most likely answer is that this is a grift. This is a shakedown. This is, we have bills to pay. Steve, you often provide lessons to the audience about
pimping ain't easy, but it is necessary. Is that what you're saying?
Your obligation. You're on the narrow road, but you're broadcasting.
Yep.
They're just broadcasting, and they know that. Listen, you're not a sin for going to Amazon and buying that because they're patronizing you. If you're going to watch something holy, but prove me, bear the fruit by all means, Amazon or Netflix or anybody you want to, that you are fully invested in walking the narrow road. But I'm sure we can find all manner of content, and I'm not talking about rated R movies, but Netflix and Amazon both have been fairly aggressive in promoting depraved levels of godlessness. I don't. So is repenting really for reals, for across the board, or is it just a slogan meant to pay some bills? I think the likely one is they like money.
All right. So just pandering to the points of being patronizing is what Todd says. Aaron, what say you?
Okay, we're going to do a quick experiment in real time here.
Okay.
I'm typing into Grok. I'm a marketing manager for Amazon Prime Video, and I'm working on an Easter-themed section for religious / Christian-themed rentals. I need an alliteration for that starts with the word R, or the letter R, that has to do with Christianity, like rent and... Let's see what Grok has to say. Amazing live radio.
It is.
Rent and redemption.
Okay.
That doesn't really make sense.
I like the term redemption more, but it
Rent
also
and
doesn't
redemption.
rhyme. Yeah.
Rent and resurrection.
Okay. Rent and resurrection.
So we're getting down the list here.
Yep.
Makes me think that this wasn't just the first thing that ChatGPT, rent and revelation.
Okay.
There's a lot of religious words, or a lot of Christian words that start with R. Rent and repent.
Did make the list?
No, rent and repent, that was the next one. That was the fourth one.
Fourth one on the list.
So maybe that's what it was.
Here's what we're saying.
I will also say Amazon Prime Video is the only... Now, I didn't go and look all the time incessantly. I have no idea, and I don't even know if you know the data behind this, how Nefarious performed on Amazon Prime Video. But that's the only that's the only video platform that I know Nefarious was available on that I didn't have to go and search it out. Like they were actually promoting it. So I don't know if they know something about data and viewer preferences that these religious and some of these kind of new waves of religious and Christian themed movies that are actually well done, if those are very popular. And so they want to make sure that, you know, they're just broadcasting like Todd said. It could be that.
Steve, you and I, when we were Aaron's age, both of us worked at the Des Moines Register. At that time, which is not that long ago, they were printing the Easter story and the Christmas story on the front page of the paper. They put it in the back of the paper at some point, and now it's non-existent. But there's a reason why the Des Moines Register on its front page of the website, I haven't seen the actual paper, is doing everything you need to know about the papal conclave and how many Catholics are in Iowa. Have they gone Christian, Steve? Or are they trying to sell some copy?
It's more likely the latter. But it's indicative of a major vibe shift on some level that they have been reduced to doing this to some degree. It's at least a demonstration of an acknowledgement of some form of self-awareness. Now, not necessarily based in any form of, well, repentance. Okay. But it's at least an acknowledgement of market reality. I mean, how frustrated have we been just as conservatives that market realities just didn't even apply anymore? Just keep losing money. Just keep losing endless amounts of money. Just keep going out of business. Just tank over and over again. Just keep alienating customers. How many times have we said here the last few years, Todd, and said, at what point do market forces actually, the natural laws of economics actually, you know, at least withstand some of this? It appears we've reached that point to some degree. I mean, Disney took a trans character out of an upcoming animated film and replaced it with a character who prays in the name of Jesus for the first time in a Disney film in something like 50 years. Okay? So that is pandering to the point of being patronizing as well, but that's also way more acknowledgement of market forces than many of these industries and institutions have done in about a decade.
That is a legitimate cup half full assessment. But
I'm not even saying it's cup half full. Like there's at least something in the cup. How about I can take a drink of the cup? May not be half full, but at least I can get a good sip out of the cup. That thing was like you after Lent, dude. I'm dry. That cup was dry for like a decade, or at least maybe a decade's too long. At least like it does seem like Endgame was also very on brand for a title. You know what I'm saying? Like that does seem to be 2019 and Endgame seemed to be the final end of pop culture as we knew it. It was trending in that direction, but Endgame seemed to be like Zeppelin came out for an encore and did Kashmir, and then they left or Stairway to Heaven and left the stage. That's all there is.
How many times have I remarked in the last 5 years before I started working for you, and even afterwards, because that's when the final phase of Marvel. Pop Culture Tuesday was one of my favorite segments every single week.
Now it's just wailing and gnashing of teeth.
Correct.
Yes. So it seems like Endgame was kind of like a meta acknowledgement. Hey guys, after we wrap this thing up just the way you want us to, we're just going to start shanking you every chance we can get and shaking you down. Yeah. So this is at least some pivot from that. How big of a pivot, I don't know, but it's something, right?
Well, it might be something really bad, because if they view us as a legitimate market force that they can rely upon by giving us, this is my point about Endgame. What good did it do? They can give us inspiring content and they know we'll never wake up. Doesn't that scare the hell out of you? It does me.
Yes.
That we will give you the passion of the Christ and know that it won't cause you to do a damn thing.
I will admit that is suboptimal. Okay? I will admit that is suboptimal. I will. But I would also say that is largely the church's fault then. That if our own narratives, if we are so far gone that our own narratives now can be not repackaged like Russell Crowe as Jack Nicholson's shining character, on the back of the ark typing in papyrus, all work and no play makes Noah a dull boy. Okay, and chasing his wife around with an axe, saying, "Here's Noah." All right, that's agitprop. Okay, but if we're at the point now that they can take our narratives sincerely and package them in some understanding of orthodoxy, and then sell them back to us, and we will consume it, and still just and be not driven to any form of conviction or action, then I'm going to tell you, I don't think that's pop culture's fault. I'd look right at the pulpits and say, my goodness, what is going on here on Sunday mornings that we're that far gone that now when even we receive our own tropes back to us, we still cannot be wakened.
Speaking of providential timing, how much what we just did has to do, and I can't believe that you were connecting those dots when you did, what it has to do with the polling we just discussed. Mm-hmm. That's why even in this world, when it's bottoming out, those numbers on every front can still be so high. Son of God, raised from the dead, walks on water. What does that mean for my life? Netflix and chill.
Because it's amazing facts. They're just amazing facts. It's not a worldview. It's not any kind of catechesis. It's not any kind of training for any missiology. It's just amazing facts. Oh, wow, that was amazing. Hey, that was really cool when Jesus did. Yes. Basically, the churches have turned us into Chris Farley. Remember when you turned the water into wine? That was great. That was great. All right, anyway, we'll be back after these messages. That's essentially what our churches have done. They're just random, amazing facts.
Isn't that faith? They said they believed, Steve.
Well, even the demons believe. Right? So then what fruit bears forth from that belief to indicate it is of the right form of saving belief? But how will they hear the word if there is no one to teach it to them? Where would this understanding come from? I mean, that's where we are right now. That's where we are right now.
That ain't good.
It's not good. It isn't. But this last election demonstrated some mass of people are waking up. Now, what they're awakening to is up for debate. And that's what, as our show, we're trying to step into that breach to do what we can in the little corner of the universe we have, which is not an insignificant audience, obviously. Otherwise, we wouldn't have just gotten a contract extension. But it's also, it's also a little corner of a vast universe at the same time. So we need and there needs to be an army of people doing the same. And there are several. There's more than there used to be. Okay, but we need even more people. I mean, see Charlie Kirk go on Bill Maher's show. For example, that is, that's Daniel in the Lion's Den kind of stuff. Okay. So we need more of that because this energy has to be channeled into a righteous direction. That's how you go from a moment to a movement. And what we do, what the church does with this energy level is going to determine whether or not the election was just a moment. People just had a moment, one last gasp of I'm fed up, or whether it's a harbinger of a movement. Donald Trump is going to be 79 years old later this year. Can't run for another term. And it dawned on me this morning, anticipating I was going to talk about him in the courts again today and what he's going to have to do. It just feels like we have to literally ask this guy to do everything. Doesn't it feel like that?
Yep.
Yeah.
You know why it feels that way?
Because we do.
Because we do.
Because of Netflix and chill.
Because of everything else we're just talking about.
Yes.
Okay? And I mean, it's tough to ask the Apostle Paul, ask St. Augustine to do everything, okay? But we essentially have to ask Donald Trump to do and lead everything in the civic realm of righteousness, because we just don't believe it will systemically. I mean, right now, the Florida legislature is essentially trying to undo the DeSantis administration. So we just don't have a systemic, our governor is not going to run for another term when everybody thought she was going to. And frankly, all the candidates that are currently being discussed to take that void aren't necessarily inspiring a lot of the kind of people we hang out with and roll with, okay? I don't think any single one of them, at least right now in their current form, now it's early, they could get better, but none of them are, nobody in hell is like, oh boy, here comes Zach Nunn. No one's doing that, right?
We need crusaders.
Yeah, we do. And that's where the church comes in. That's where they come from. They come from our churches. See you tomorrow. Romans 8:28.